The subway silence at Subway was crowded that evening. People rushed in and out, faces tired, eyes heavy, each carrying their own story of struggle. The sound of the train echoed against the cold walls, but among the restless movement, a silence was building. Something unusual was about to happen, something that would be remembered long after the ride ended. A man sat quietly in the corner. His black jacket looked simple, his hair slightly messy, and his face calm. Most people did not recognize him at first. He looked like any other tired passenger, but this man was Keanu Reeves. He was one of the biggest stars in the world. Yet, here he was, sitting on the subway without security, without cameras, without any spotlight. Beside him stood a young worker, holding a heavy bag of tools. His hands were rough, his shirt stained, and his eyes showed exhaustion. No one looked at him twice. To the world, he was invisible, another man trying to survive another day. But Keanu noticed him. His eyes softened as he saw how the young man's shoulders bent under the weight. When the train jolted, the young worker almost lost balance. Keanu immediately stood, offering his seat without saying a word. At first, the worker shook his head, embarrassed to accept kindness in front of strangers. But Keanu smiled gently, a smile that carried no pride, only respect. Finally, the worker sat lowering his head with gratitude. The silence inside the subway grew heavier. People started to whisper, realizing who had given up his seat. The man everyone admired on screen, the actor known around the world, had just chosen humility over ego. And yet, this moment was more than a simple act. It was a spark. An older woman sitting nearby began to wipe her eyes. A student looked down, remembering how he had ignored his tired mother earlier that day. A businessman tightened his grip on his briefcase, thinking of the workers he had dismissed so coldly at the office. Keanu's quiet action reached beyond the seat. It touched hearts, but not everyone was moved. A man in a sharp suit leaned against the door, scoffing. He muttered, "Of course, he's doing it for attention. Actors always need an audience." His words cut through the moment, creating tension. People turned to see if Keanu would react, but Keanu did not answer with anger. He did not defend himself. Instead, he simply looked at the man and nodded. Then, in his calm voice, he said, "Kindness does not need attention. It just needs to exist." The words fell into the silence like soft rain. The man in the suit looked away, but his face betrayed something deeper, shame. The train moved forward, carrying strangers who would never forget what they had seen. And while the ride itself was short, the memory of that small kindness stretched far beyond the tunnels. No cameras recorded it, no headlines wrote about it. But in that subway car, Keanu Reeves had shown something the world often forgets. That true strength is not found in fame, wealth, or power. It is found in the simple courage to choose kindness when no one expects it. This was only the beginning. None of the passengers knew that this one moment would start a ripple, spreading far and wide, touching lives in ways they could never imagine. And as the train slowed to its next stop, the effect of kindness was already alive. The ripple begins after the subway ride. Life returned to its usual rush. The young worker who had been offered the seat stepped out at his stop. He held his heavy bag tighter, but his heart felt lighter. For weeks, he had been treated like he was nothing more than another laborer. People often ignored his tired face, his sore hands, and his silent battles. But that one moment with Keanu changed something inside him. He replayed the scene again and again in his mind. The world-famous actor had looked at him not as a stranger to be ignored, but as a human being, worthy of respect. It was not about the seat, it was about dignity. When he reached home that night, his mother noticed something different. Her son walked in with the same tired steps, but his eyes carried a glow she had not seen in years. Over dinner, he finally spoke. "Today, someone showed me kindness. Someone reminded me that I matter." He did not mention Keanu's name, because it was not about celebrity. It was about the act itself. The next morning, he made a decision. He woke up earlier than usual and carried an extra sandwich with his tools. At the construction site, noticed a boy who often searched the trash for scraps of food. Instead of looking away, he offered the sandwich. The boy's smile was small, but it carried the same warmth Keanu's smile had carried on the subway. And just like that, the ripple began. Meanwhile, the older woman from the subway, the one who had wiped her tears, could not sleep that night. She lived alone, her children busy in different cities. Loneliness had become her shadow, and she often felt invisible in the crowd. But seeing Keanu give up his seat had stirred memories of her late husband, who had always opened doors, carried bags, and offered kindness without expecting anything. In return, the next day, when she went out to buy groceries, she noticed the young cashier struggling with a rude customer. Normally, she would have stayed quiet, but this time, she stepped forward. She placed a gentle hand on the cashier's arm and said, "You're doing well, dear. Don't let unkind words hurt you." The cashier smiled, surprised by the support. The rude customer looked embarrassed and walked away. It was a small act, but it mattered. It was a voice standing for respect. Back in the city, the student who had seen Keanu's act on the subway carried his own guilt. He could not forget how he had ignored his mother's call earlier, too busy with his own life. That night, he dialed her number. When her voice cracked with surprise and joy, he felt a weight lift. "I love you, Mom," he said softly. And for the first time in months, she slept with peace in her heart. These were strangers, each carrying their own pain, but one single moment had touched them all in different ways. Kindness was moving quietly through their lives, invisible yet powerful. But not everyone felt the same. The man in the sharp suit, the one who had mocked Keanu on the train, sat in his office that night staring at his reflection in the glass window. He told himself it was foolish, that kindness was weakness. Yet, deep inside, something unsettled him. He remembered Keanu's calm voice. Kindness does not need attention, it just needs to exist. He tried to dismiss it, but the words kept echoing. He poured himself another drink, but the echo only grew louder. The subway ride was over, but its effect was only beginning. Lives had been touched, choices were shifting, and a new story was unfolding, one where humility and kindness slowly started to fight against the coldness of the world, and at the center of it all was one man, who never even spoke of what he had done. The quiet storm days turned into weeks, but the memory of that subway moment did not fade. It was strange how something so small could live so long in people's hearts. The young worker, who had once been invisible to everyone, started to notice a change in himself. Each day, he tried to pass on a little kindness, sharing his food, helping a stranger carry something heavy, or speaking gently when others were harsh. He was not rich, he had no fame, yet he felt stronger than before. It was as if that one act of respect had given him back his own self-worth. But not all ripples are calm. Some shake the water. One afternoon, at his construction site, the worker defended a new boy who was being shouted at by his supervisor. His voice was steady, but the supervisor did not take it well. "You think you're some kind of hero now?" the man barked, humiliation burning in his words. For a moment, the worker felt fear. He knew he could lose his job for speaking up, but then he remembered Keanu's gentle smile on the subway. He remembered the feeling of being treated with dignity. He stood taller and said, "No, I just think everyone deserves respect." Silence followed. The supervisor glared but did not reply. The others, usually silent, watched with wide eyes. They saw courage, and it planted a seed in them. Miles away, the older woman, who had been inspired by the same subway moment, found herself at the hospital. She was there for a checkup when she noticed a nurse being spoken to harshly by a frustrated patient. The woman stepped forward, placing her hand softly on the nurse's shoulder. "You're doing enough, dear," she said gently. "Don't let anger steal your heart." The nurse blinked back tears. Later, she told her colleagues about the old woman's words. That one kindness carried into the hospital halls, softening the tired hearts of people who often only heard complaints. And then there was the student. He kept calling his mother every evening, but one night, when she didn't pick up, panic filled him. He rushed home to find her sick on the couch, too weak to get up. Guilt twisted inside him. How many times had he ignored her before? Now, he carried her to the hospital, stayed by her side, and whispered, "I'm sorry I wasn't here sooner. I won't fail you again." His mother held his hand, her weak smile showing forgiveness. It was not just an apology, it was a promise. But far away, the man in the sharp suit still wrestled with his own pride. He was known in the business world for being ruthless. For him, respect was earned through power, not given freely. Yet Keanu's words haunted him. One evening, while leaving his office, he saw a janitor accidentally drop a bucket of water in the lobby. Usually he would have snapped, scolded, or walked past with disgust. This time, he paused. His instinct told him to be harsh, to prove his authority. But something inside cracked. He bent down, helped pick up the fallen mop, and said quietly, "Don't worry about it." The janitor froze, shocked. No boss had ever spoken kindly to him before. The man in the suit walked away quickly, almost ashamed of himself. But as he stepped into his car, his heart felt strangely lighter. The storm of kindness was no longer quiet. It was moving through hearts, stirring guilt, sparking change, and creating moments that could not be ignored. And all of it had begun from one simple action on a subway. But destiny had more to weave, because soon, these separate lives, touched by the same spark, would collide in ways none of them could have predicted. Paths crossing. Life has a way of weaving invisible threads. People who believe they are strangers often discover their lives are tied together by moments they never expected. The ripple of kindness that began in the subway was now quietly pulling lives toward one another, like rivers slowly meeting the sea. The young worker, who had defended his fellow laborer, found himself one evening attending a free seminar about small business opportunities. He wanted to dream bigger, not just for himself, but for his family. The seminar was held in a modest community hall, and among the audience were students, workers, and even professionals. He sat nervously, clutching his notebook, not realizing that fate had placed others from the subway in the same room. In the back row sat the student, who had promised his sick mother to change his ways. He was attending the seminar because he wanted to learn about building a better future for her. When his eyes met the workers, there was no recognition at first, but something familiar stirred inside both of them. And then, at the corner of the hall, the older woman from the subway entered. She had been invited by a neighbor, though she almost did not come. Loneliness had kept her quiet for so long, but something inside whispered that she should go. She walked with her cane slowly, and the worker quickly rose to offer her his seat. When their eyes met, she smiled warmly, as if kindness had found kindness again. As the seminar began, the man in the sharp suit also arrived. His company had sponsored the event, though he attended reluctantly. He sat in the front, checking his phone, uninterested in the speaker, but then his gaze wandered. His eyes landed on the young worker, the student, and the old woman. For a reason he could not explain, something shifted in him. He did not recognize them as the strangers from the subway, but the energy felt strangely familiar as the evening went on. The speaker invited people to share personal thoughts about resilience and dreams. Silence filled the room until the young worker slowly stood up. His voice trembled at first, but then it grew stronger. All my life I thought I was invisible, but one day, a stranger showed me respect. He reminded me that I matter, and because of him, I try every day to pass that on. The student felt his chest tighten. He remembered that subway ride. The moment Keanu had stood, he realized this worker had been the one sitting beside him. The old woman also gasped softly, her eyes filling with tears. She, too, remembered. The man in the sharp suit froze. It was as if the air itself reminded him of that day, of the words he had dismissed. Kindness does not need attention. It just needs to exist. One by one, the strangers began to speak. The student shared about his mother, the old woman, about the nurse she had comforted. Their voices were soft, but they carried power. People in the room leaned forward, listening, hearts stirring with emotions they could not ignore. The man in the suit shifted uncomfortably. He wanted to walk out, but his feet felt heavy. Instead, for the first time in years, he raised his hand. His voice was quieter than anyone had ever heard from him. I was on that train too, he said, eyes lowered. I mocked what I saw. I called it an act, but I was wrong, because that moment has followed me every day since. And even when I fought it, it kept pushing me to change. The room fell silent. No one expected a man like him to speak with such honesty. And then the old woman whispered what everyone was thinking. It was not just an act, it was a seed, and all of us here are the proof. The room filled with a strange, almost sacred, quiet. No one clapped, no one spoke loudly. But in that silence, something powerful was born, a shared realization that they had all been changed by the same moment. The same man, the same kindness. And far away, unaware of the gathering, Keanu Reeves was sitting alone in a small cafe, sipping tea quietly. He had no idea that his simple action had brought strangers together, changing their lives forever. The turning point after the seminar ended, the group of strangers lingered outside the hall. They stood together awkwardly at first, unsure of what to say, but there was an invisible bond holding them close. The young worker finally broke the silence. Isn't it strange, he said softly, that we were all there, on the same train, that same evening? The student nodded, his voice quiet but certain. It was more than strange. It feels like it was meant to happen. The old woman smiled gently, her eyes glistening under the streetlight. Kindness has a way of bringing people together. Maybe this was not chance. Maybe it was a reminder. Even the man in the sharp suit stood still, his usual arrogance missing. He looked at the others with a mix of guilt and wonder. I spent years believing respect was weakness. Yet here I am, standing with you all, because one man chose to be kind. Maybe I was wrong about everything. Their words hung in the cool night air. It was not just conversation, it was confession, healing, and awakening. In the days that followed, they began to meet again. Sometimes at the community hall, sometimes at a small cafe, sometimes in the park. Each time they shared stories of how kindness had touched their lives, and each time they felt stronger, more connected. But one evening when they gathered again, the young worker spoke with hesitation. I know we have all been changed by that moment, but if kindness is so powerful, should we not share it? Not just in small acts, but in something larger? Something that reaches more people? The student leaned forward, his eyes bright. What if we start something together? A project, maybe. Something that shows others that kindness is not weakness, it's strength. The old woman's hands trembled as she held her cane. It does not have to be grand. Even a simple effort can change lives. Look at us, we are proof of that. For the first time, the man in the suit did not dismiss the idea. Instead, he spoke with sincerity. I have resources. I have contacts. If we are serious about this, I can help. A hush fell over the group. The worker, the student, the old woman. They never expected support from him. Yet here he was, offering not just words but action. They decided to begin with something small. They planned to organize a day of service in their city, cleaning public spaces, helping the homeless, visiting hospitals. They wanted to bring strangers together, just as they had been brought together by a stranger's kindness. At first, people laughed at the idea. Some called it foolish, others called it naive. But the group did not stop. They went door to door, made calls, handed out flyers. Slowly, interest grew. A few volunteers signed up, then a few more. And soon, what seemed impossible began to take shape. The man in the suit used his office connections to secure supplies. The student gathered his friends from college. The worker invited his fellow laborers. The old woman spoke to neighbors who had once ignored her on the morning of the event. The group stood together in a park watching as dozens of people arrived. Families, students, workers, even strangers, they had all come, curious to see what kindness could build. The young worker's heart pounded as he realized this was real. "Look at them," he whispered. "They came because of us." But the old woman shook her head gently. "No, they came because of him, because of the man who planted the seed." Her words fell into silence, and they all knew who she meant. Keanu Reeves. The man who had no idea his quiet action on a subway had grown into something far greater, and yet, destiny was not finished, because soon, their path and his would cross again. The return of the seed. The day of service became more than anyone expected. The group had prepared for a small turnout, maybe a few dozen people, but as the hours passed, the crowd grew. Children carried bags of food for the homeless. Students painted walls that had been left broken for years. Workers cleaned streets with laughter in their voices. And neighbors who had never spoken before worked side by side. It was not just work, it was connection. For the first time in a long time, the city felt alive with unity. The young worker stood with pride, wiping sweat from his forehead. He watched a boy smile as he received a warm meal. He thought of the sandwich he had once shared, and how that small act had started his own change. The old woman sat in a chair, handing out water bottles. Every person who passed thanked her, and she felt something she had not felt in years. Purpose. She was no longer invisible. The student recorded moments on his phone, capturing laughter, hugs, and simple acts of giving. He planned to share it online, not for fame, but so others could see how kindness could build community. The man in the sharp suit moved quietly, making sure supplies were delivered, helping where needed. He was not used to humility, but he felt freer than he ever had in his office towers. People looked at him differently, not with fear, but with respect. But then, as the day drew to an end, something happened that none of them had expected. A man, in a simple jacket, walked into the park. He looked tired but peaceful, his steps calm, his eyes carrying the same quiet kindness they remembered. At first, no one noticed. He moved without seeking attention. But when the old woman lifted her head, her eyes widened. She whispered softly, almost in disbelief, "It's him, Keanu Reeves." The others turned, hearts racing. It felt impossible. Yet there he was, walking among the crowd as if he belonged to it. Someone explained that he had been filming nearby and had heard about the event. Curiosity had brought him, but now his eyes softened as he saw what stood before him, a movement born out of a single act. The young worker's voice trembled as he stepped forward. "Sir, you don't know us, but all of this, it started because of you, because you gave up your seat that night." Keanu paused, his expression humble, almost confused. He shook his head gently. "No, this is because of all of you. Kindness doesn't belong to one person. It belongs to everyone who chooses it." The student's eyes filled with tears. "But if you had not planted that seed, none of this would have happened." Keanu smiled, a soft, almost fatherly smile. "Seeds are everywhere. Sometimes all it takes is one to remind us that we can water them too." The crowd grew quiet, listening. It was as if the city itself had stopped to breathe. The old woman's voice broke through, shaky but strong. "You reminded us of something the world forgets, that respect, humility, and kindness are never small. They change everything." Keanu bowed his head, his eyes glistening. "Then promise me this," he said gently. "Don't let it end here. Keep passing it on. Not for me, not for recognition, but for each other, because the world needs it." The worker, the student, the old woman, the man in the suit, all of them nodded, their hearts heavy yet full. They knew this was not the end, but the beginning of something larger. And as the sun set over the park, Keanu stayed with them, helping quietly, speaking to strangers, treating each person with the same dignity he had shown on the subway. He blended into the crowd, just another human being choosing kindness. Later that night, when the group sat together once more, they reflected on what had happened. The student whispered, This is the proof. Fame fades, wealth fades, power fades, but kindness." The old woman finished his thought with a smile. "Kindness always wins." The group fell silent, hearts warm, eyes shining with tears. They had lived the truth, and they would carry it forward, and somewhere deep inside, they knew this was the real Keanu Reeves effect.